Hi friends, there is a fresh article on Indian Express explained speaking about why saving the middle class is critical for India's economy and its democracy. India's economy 2021. In 2020, COVID disruption resulted in reducing India's vibrant middle class by one third. Can the government stem the slide? There are two main reasons why the novel coronavirus has been such a disaster for the world economy. One, that it infects everyone, regardless of their economic status. And two, because it essentially spreads just the way economic growth does, via human interaction. In other words, controlling the virus spreading and limiting the damage on the health side necessary by definition results in incurring economic losses. While this was known from day one, this odious trade off explains why so many governments and populations have been caught napping with more damaging second and third waves. India is no exception. But unlike other countries such as China, which controlled the virus much sooner, or the US and UK, which despite being hard hit by COVID, had the financial resources to protect the livelihoods of their people, India suffered grievously. Starting April, it was expected that India's economy will register a fast economic rebound and quickly make up for the losses incurred in 2020. But the massive and unabated surge in COVID cases all across the country, which has exposed the government's lack of preparation over the past year as grossly inadequate, points to the possibility of a scenario where India may not even be able to make up for the economic contraction it suffered in the last financial year 2020-21. But what does it mean in real terms? Such a sharp contraction in GDP growth essentially means that millions of people will not lose part or all their current incomes but also the means to earn their income. What's worse, since Indian economy was already decelerating before the pandemic, people do not have the savings to fight for long. Sooner rather than later, they will see a sharp worsening in their economic, physical, and social well being. A lot of focus has been on the pitiable state of India's migrant workforce, but there is an equally primal shriek of desperation being let out by Indian middle class, one which has largely gone unheard. Last month, the US-based Pew Research Centre put out some exact numbers in this regards. Prior to the pandemic, it was anticipated that 99 million people in India would belong to the global middle class in 2020. A year into the pandemic, this number is estimated to be 66 million, cut by a third. Meanwhile, the number of poor in India is projected to have reached 134 million, more than double the 59 million expected prior to the recession, said the Pew report. While the fact that 75 million people will be pushed back to abject levels of poverty, of living at less than $2 a day, what is equally, if not more worrisome, is that in fact the India's middle class was reduced by one third, and that is just the impact of the last year. Given its severity, the current second wave and its economic impact could well mean that Indian middle class will be reduced to half of what it was before the pandemic. Typically, economic researchers tend to use income or expenditure to spot the middle class. For instance, in the above case, the poor live on $2 or less daily, low income on $2.101 or $10. Middle income is between $10 to $20. Upper middle income is $20 to $50, and high income on more than $50. But it is possible to define the middle class as those whose expenditure ranges from 75% to 125% of the median expenditure. Further, caste is not the only marker of being middle class. It is also characterized by certain values, mindsets, educational and occupational choices. For instance, people belonging to the middle class aim to have decent, well paying jobs or small businesses, hope to own a house of their own, seek to have a secure retirement, and want to secure the healthcare and educational needs of their family. Every generation of a middle class household hopes that its next generation would be slightly better off. Why does the middle class matter? Unlike its humble name, the middle class is often considered the glue that keeps the modern liberal democratic economies from falling apart under the strain of heavy rising inequalities. In his 1984 article in the New York Times, well known political economist Lester Thoreau said that the sinking of the American middle class was a cause of concern for the American political democracy. What Karl Marx saw was an inevitable revolution was based on the assumption that the economy would eventually generate a bipolar income distribution composed of rich and poor. Once this bipolar situation existed, he said the poor would revolt, destroy the rich, and establish communism. But Marx predicted revolution did not occur because he did not foresee the rise of the middle class. The middle class had an interest in preserving capitalism and voted to alleviate the worst excess of capitalism with social welfare programs. Their very presence gave the poor hope that they too could escape from poverty. Beyond the political aspect, it is now well established that economic growth is stronger in countries that have a strong middle class. In 2011, Asian Development Bank paper titled The Role of the Middle Class in Economic Development. What do cross-country data show? Looked at no less than 72 developing countries, including India, to confirm the findings by researchers like Nobel winners Abhijit Banerjee and Esther Duflo and many others that middle class had a salutary impact through various ways. For instance, the middle class is where entrepreneurs that foster innovation and growth emerge. Middle class values also encourage the accumulation of human capital via education and savings. Moreover, in comparison to the poor, the middle class has the ability and power to demand better public service delivery and greater accountability from public officials and support growth-oriented policies. But the world over, the middle class has been shrinking and this trend is considered worrisome. Among middle class households, there is now a growing discontent with economic conditions. In this context, the stagnation of middle class living standards in OECD countries has been accompanied in recent years by the emergence of new forms of nationalism, isolationism, populism, and protectionism. Nationalist and anti-globalization sentiments can arise because a sinking middle class produces disillusionment and damages political engagement or turns voters towards anti-establishment and protectionist policies. Political instability is an important channel through which a squeezed middle class may upset economic investment and growth. In India, all the data pointed to the middle class coming under severe strain even before the pandemic. Unemployment levels had risen to a 45-year high even as consumption expenditure had fallen sharply. Health and nutrition data also showed a significant decline, even as educational outcomes continues to lag. National accounts data showed Indians getting more and more indebted since 2017. Further fueling the middle class discontent in recent years had been the high retail inflation, especially led by heavy taxation on every fuel like petrol and LPG. It was this juncture that the COVID pandemic wreaked havoc. So what can be done to remedy the situation? The ADB paper had concluded policies that factor in the welfare of the middle class and nurture their growth may be more effective long-term strategy for alleviating poverty compared to policies focusing solely on the poor. That's because a growth strategy that includes the middle class is likely to be more sustainable given that more people across different racial and ethnic groups share in the growth process. The third big thrust has to be to address the lack of jobs and falling labor force participation rate. In particular, this will require a concerted effort to improve the skills of Indian middle class. Mask off and stay safe. Thank you.